Let's talk about the OKR framework, objectives and key results. We're going to go over one, what is an OKR and what are they used for? Two, how to implement OKRs. Three, some real world examples. And then four, some common pitfalls to try to avoid. So let's start with what OKRs actually are. OKR stands for objectives and key results. So the objective, that is the what. What is it that you want to accomplish, right? It's qualitative, it's directional, and it's meant to be something inspirational, something along the lines of, improve our customer experience or grow the mobile user base. The key results, that's the how. They're measurable, they're quantitative, and they're time-bound. So if the objective is something along the lines of improving the customer experience, then your key results, they might be along the lines of something else. Reducing the average response time for support from 8 hours to 2 hours within the first quarter of the year, or increasing the customer satisfaction score from 70% to 90% within 90 days, right? So both of those, they're measurable, they're quantitative, and they are time-bound. And that's what an OKR is. One objective and 2 to 4 measurable results for that objective. So what are they used for? OKRs are a goal-setting framework, and it's designed to kind of make a mental shift from thinking in features to thinking in outcomes, right? So it's a tool for a mindset change. So instead of saying something like, we need to build a dark mode by Q2, instead, we reframe the question and say, we want to improve retention by making the product more pleasant for late night users. First is a task, and the other is a purpose. So it's designed to kind of align teams and drive measurable progress. And the big difference between OKRs and traditional, performance goals or KPIs is that OKRs are more about focus and not just about metrics. So your OKRs, they're intentionally meant to kind of stress you a little bit. They're not supposed to be easy or even guaranteed. A good OKR kind of should feel like you'll hit about 70 to 80% of it if things go well. And if you hit 100, like every single time, then you're probably setting targets that are too safe. So let's talk about how to actually implement them. First, you have to set the right cadence. So OKRs, they're usually written quarterly, sometimes annually for a really long-term direction, but I think quarterly is usually best because then it kind of forces you to iterate and adjust based on what's working and what isn't at a regular basis. Second, you need to keep the structure really simple. Each team should really only have 1 or 2 objectives, and each objective should really only have 2 to 4 key results. And any more than that, and you've just really kind of created a to-do list instead of that specific focus mechanism. Third, and maybe most critical, is that your OKRs need to cascade, right? So the company, that sets the broad objectives, and then that trickles down to each department and each team, which defines their own objectives that support those higher goals and are driven by their individual key results. Fourth is the tracking. So OKRs aren't just some set it and forget it kind of metric. They only work if you measure the progress consistently. So the team should be reviewing your OKRs at least bi-weekly or monthly, to update everyone, make sure the confidence levels are up, score the results, and discuss what's blocking the progress. And that's the critical point. You want to clear your blockers. Fifth, we got to make sure the OKRs are visible. So if you're using some kind of specific software or even just a shared document, the point really is about transparency. Everyone in the company at all levels should be able to see everyone else's OKRs. It's not just for accountability, but to make sure that everyone is on the same page and working towards the same goals. It's kind of like a company reference book. So let's take a look at an example of how this would work in practice, right? So let's say the company objective is to become the most trusted platform for small businesses, right? It's big, lofty goal. But then the marketing team will come in and might define their objectives as building the brand credibility in specific key verticals. And then knowing that objective, they can set their actual measurable key results, such as result 1, earning 15 media mentions in specific industry publications. Key result 2, growing your newsletter subscribers by 25%. And then the product team might come in with their own objective to support the company objective, something like deliver readability our users can depend on. For that, their key result then might be achieve 99.99% uptime and reduce user-reported bugs by 40% over the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks, whatever it is, right? Measurable, results for those objectives. So now everyone in both teams, they're pointed in the same direction at those company objectives, but they're contributing in different ways that make sense for their individual functions. And let's look at a different angle. So let's say a SaaS startup that's having some churn issues maybe. And their objective, it might be really simple: increase customer retention, right? It's a great goal. And then the key results to hit that, something like reduce churn rate from 8% to 5%. And then you could come in with increasing your average customer lifetime value from $1,200 to $1,800, right? And then the third, launch a customer success program with 80% engagement rate, right? So we've got our 3 key results, measurable metrics, based on that overall objective, right? So it kind of combines that strategic intent, right, keeping more customers, with these very specific measurable results. So let's do one more. This time let's focus on an engineering team, right? And their objective is going to be improving system reliability, right? Because who wants a system that goes down, right? So for this objective, we might have our first key result of reducing the production incidents by 50%. And then our second, to increase the average time between failures from 3 days to 10 days, something like that. And then finally, implementing an automated rollback for all the critical services, right? We can measure the success of each one of those results, but it all rolls up into that main objective of system stability. And one of the things that's really great about this whole system is that it applies equally well to startups or large organizations or even personal and team goals. The structure scales really, really well. So now let's take a look at some of the common pitfalls. And the first big one is confusing your OKRs with KPIs, right? So KPIs, and we'll go over that in another video, KPIs are metrics that you monitor, metrics. OKRs are goals that you're actively trying to move on, right? KPIs or metrics that tell you how healthy the business is or how much you're accomplishing. OKRs tell you where you're trying to take it, right? You're still going to use them both, but they are for very different purposes. The second pitfall is having too many OKRs, right? If you got 5 objectives and each one has 5 or 7 key results, that's a lot of things to track, 25 plus, right? And your team's going to lose focus. Then you've just got a task list. OKRs are about that focus, so you really need to limit it to what really, really is important for that quarter. Third, writing OKRs as tasks. So something like ship version 2.0, that's a task. It's not an outcome. OKR should describe the impact of doing that work, right? Like increasing the user engagement by 20% with version 2.0 features. Focus on the result, not the activity. The next pitfall is lack of engagement, especially from the leadership team, right? If the executives aren't using it or referencing the OKRs, then no one else is going to do it. So the OKRs only really work when leadership reviews them consistently and uses them in the decision-making process. Next point is setting OKRs that are either too safe or too unrealistic. So if you're doing too safe, then you're just documenting, your business as usual. But if you're doing too unrealistic, then your teams are kind of going to start taking them seriously and even get demotivated, right? It's all about finding that spot in between where you're setting something that's aspirational, but also achievable to some degree. Another common issue is treating OKRs like performance reviews, right? OKRs are for alignment and focus, not for judging the performance of teams, right? And that's why they're aspirational. If you tie in your OKR achievement directly to things like bonuses or promotions, then you're going to have issues setting really aspirational and accurate goals because people are going to pick things that they can guarantee they'll hit. And that's not the point. The point is to aim high and learn. And then finally, the last issue is even if you have this all set up, not learning from the process. So at the end of the quarter, every OKR should be reviewed and scored, whether it's been achieved or not and how much. And the value there, it's not just a score, it's also kind of a reflection. It's did we stretch the right way and were we aiming in the right direction, right? Were these the right metrics and what did we learn at the end of the quarter? So if you're implementing OKRs for the first time, it's best to start simple, right? You choose 1 or 2 objectives for the company and then let each team define their own supporting OKRs all the way through, right? Keep it lightweight, keep it visible, and make sure you're iterating every quarter because you're going to learn and it's going to change because teams understand why their work matters and not just what they're doing, right? So it's important to keep that end goal in mind. You're turning vague business goals into measurable outcomes and giving everyone in the company a shared language for the progress that you're making towards a shared goal.